Hey there, welcome to the Thriving and Wellness Podcast with Haley and Caitlin. This podcast is for women who are tired of just surviving and are ready to truly thrive. It's time to reclaim your health and build trust in your body.
Join us as we myth bust nutrition topics, tackle your mindset, and dive into the nerdy side of women's health. Let's jump in. So I was talking with a patient about how in December, it feels like, life just is so chaotic with all of the holidays. But then to switch to New Year's resolutions in January is so overwhelming. And she was saying how she feels like New Year's resolutions need to start in February so that she can have January to just like get back to normal first. And then she has some like mental energy and some time to think about and plan about like what sorts of new changes she wants to make in February. And I just felt like that was so smart.
Yeah. And it was so weird that you mentioned that because I was thinking the exact same thing, especially in like the business world. Everyone's just like, hey, I'm so ready to tackle this year, like January 1st, whatever. I'm like, my brain's not there yet. I can't do this. I'm still recovering. Like I still had like I had a fairly calm holiday season, but I still felt like I just need to ease into this. I need to embrace this like winter attitude and get a little bit more rest. So I 100% agree. And I think you and I were talking about this, how how it's a great example of that all or nothing mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We decided to do like rather than New Year's resolutions, we're like focusing on something different each month. But so for January, we're doing drinking celery juice every day to just like see how it makes us feel because we've we've heard lots of good things, but we've talked about how like the research behind celery juice is like not really
Not
there.
there.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, let's just see how it makes us feel. Let's do it for a month. And if it's beneficial, we'll keep doing it. And if we're not noticing any difference, then let's not waste our time. But it took us like almost a full week to actually get started with it because we had to get a bunch of celery and then I broke our juicer. So we had to get a new one. Yeah, don't put any of your pieces in the dishwasher.
Oops.
They don't survive.
Yeah. Well, I think we should do another episode on celery juice, maybe down the road. But I think this is also a perfect example of how the all or nothing thinking can keep you stuck. Because if you didn't start right on January 1st and like because you broke your juicer, you could have said, okay, I can't do this perfectly. I'm just going to throw in the towel.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was like, hey, like, let's just still try to do it. And if we're not doing it every single day, it's not a big deal. Like, we got to do what we can.
Mm-hmm.
And we considered like we're going to do no alcohol in February. And we're like, should we just do no alcohol in January? And we're like, no, we were like both motivated to do the celery juice. So we like hurried and got one off of Marketplace.
There you go.
Um, but yeah, it is like I could totally see how people would fall into that like I'm just gonna give up and it's not worth it to even
Yeah.
keep trying.
Well, I mean, you and I talk about it all the time, how we've had both been in that mentality with our nutrition in the past. And that's part of kind of what got us to where we are now. But I'm curious how you see this popping up the most with your clients.
Um, it's funny, I feel like a lot of my clients don't even realize that they have that all or nothing thinking. Um,
100%.
it came up a ton in December where it's like, oh, well, it's the holidays and my life is chaotic. So, like, I'll just wait till January. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, I mean, if you can, like, go for a walk or eat breakfast first thing in the morning, like, do those sorts of things feel manageable for you to do sometimes?
Mm-hmm. And
Because
I
like, there are things that we can start to work on, and you don't need to be perfect.
Yes. And we are on the same page with this 100%. I think the diet industry is what really feeds into this because it, with the diets and everything, we're always taught that it has to be like you're on this diet for 30 days. If you mess up and eat one thing off plan, like you have to completely start over. You have to jump in and do it all at once. So like diet culture, these boot camps, and I'm not saying like things like a challenge or something can be helpful, but if
Mhm.
that's the only time, like the only way we're approaching this and never having flexibility, that's not going to serve you long term or help you actually build habits. That's just a
Right.
fun little challenge that you're going to do for a short period of time, right? So that all or nothing mindset, it needs to be addressed if you expect or want to see lasting changes.
Yeah, and all or nothing is diet culture. Like, it's the lifestyle change that's going to make the biggest impact in the long run, and a lifestyle change is the gray area.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And so many people don't think, I think when it comes to weight loss, especially, but maybe with hormonal changes or other diet protocols, yes, there are some things that you're needing to do short term to address certain concerns. However, for the most part, these changes that we make to see health improvements or to see weight loss, these foundational habits that you and I talk about all the time, are not going to just all of a sudden not be necessary. We need to continue doing them once we've gotten to a healthier place, once we've lost the weight. You need to stick with that in order to keep your health, keep maintaining the weight. Obviously, in light of what we're talking about, it's not going to be perfect all the time. We're not perfect. We're never we're not always consistent with these habits, but keeping them on our mind and trying to build them to be consistent as possible to maintain that healthy lifestyle.
For sure. When I'm working with a new client, I try to get them first onto just like some healthy foundations and like just having in general a healthier lifestyle. And some people come to me and they're already there. So then we're able to dive into kind of the next level faster. But we need to get those foundations set. And sometimes that takes a few months. And then we're able to do some of these extra things where it's like, okay, short term, we're going to, do something else to help kind of like treat a specific problem.
Mm-hmm.
But then once we're done with that like treatment side of things, they can go back to like these new habits and this new lifestyle that they had created rather than the like, okay, they don't have a super healthy foundation, then we're making all of these more challenging, more extreme changes, and then we're having to find like a middle balance. That seems to be a lot harder for people to be successful with.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it takes a lot longer to like create the good foundations, make bigger changes, and then go back to those good foundations again.
Which can also be challenging because people want to see results yesterday,
Yes.
right? So they're like, let me change everything overnight. And I think there is like a small set of the population that does work for, like just 180-degree difference and just changing everything overnight. But for the majority of people, especially moms and the women that we work with, like there's a lot going on in life. And so to just like overhaul everything all at once can be even more overwhelming. So I think we've definitely talked about how important or how the all or nothing mindset can be detrimental for making changes. So what are your top recommendations on how to kind of move away from that?
I always have people focus on 1 to 3 changes, and 3 is like pushing it. It depends on like what the changes are. So sometimes one of the 3 is like being more consistent with a supplement routine where it's like they're already halfway there, so they just want to be a little bit more consistent with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but really honing in on like what is one more challenging change and like just focusing on that And I tell people, I know that you're likely going to make other changes in addition to this that we're not talking about. But all I care about, like when I see you again in 2 weeks, I want to know, were you eating breakfast within an hour of waking up in the morning? How often were you doing that? I don't care if after you have breakfast, you're going to Starbucks and getting the, huge latte with all of the extra sugar, and you're eating a piece of cake, and I don't care what else you're doing the rest of the day. Just focus on the change that we're talking about, and then we'll go from there.
And a lot of things tend to fall into place after that too. Like when we jump in and do everything all at once, sure, we can change it for a minute and then things fall back to our old habits. Versus if we set one of those goals and then if you start moving or start eating that breakfast, you start to have more energy, and then you're drinking more water, and then you're doing more throughout your day. So having, again, that foundation, I think, is key. One thing that came up when you were talking about that for me is, I think you alluded to this in the beginning. A lot of people don't recognize they don't have to jump in and do everything, right? Like going back to the diet culture, they're told everything has to be done at once for them actually to see results. So to wrap their head around the fact that, hey, I can just eat breakfast and I'm still making progress here, like that can be challenging for a lot of people, especially women who are like overachievers, type A personality. Be like, I gotta have this exactly right. It's like, if I just make one change, like that's okay. And I have a lot of clients that when we take that approach, they're like, wow, this actually feels doable. Like it's almost like a sigh of relief that I can do this.
Yes. And it's easier to like not push that off. And like I'll often ask like, okay, what's tomorrow gonna look like for you? Because most of the time, the changes that I'm recommending, like for some of those foundations, it's something that you can start tomorrow. Like you don't have to wait till Monday. You don't have to, there's not all of this like preparation. You don't have to wrap your mind around it. It's something that you can do tomorrow. So I ask them to like kind of push that like, oh yeah, even though it's Wednesday and we're meeting.
You don't have to wait till next Monday.
Right. Like you can literally do this tomorrow.
Exactly. And that's important to have those realistic changes. So like you said, you're not going out and having to overhaul everything in your house to be able to follow through with it.
Yeah. Is there something else that you do with your clients to help them get kind of out of that all or nothing thought process?
I mean, it does really depend on the client, but there are some women, it takes months to recognize, like, I don't have to do this. And for me or someone else to, and this is where coaching I think can be extremely helpful, is to catch them in this. Like, sure, maybe in our calls, we set these really realistic goals, but then as soon as we're done, as soon as they start working on that, it kind of slips into that old mentality of, okay, I need to be doing this and this and that and this, and they start getting that energy again. And then a few days go by, something happens, life happens, they're not able to stick to it. So anyways, they get frustrated with that. And so just having this moment of honesty and be like, okay, we started to slip back into that all or nothing mindset. And how can we address this? How can we move forward with this? Can we stick to these goals? And it can be really challenging to unlearn that. I think in so many aspects of our work that we do with a lot of women is, yes, there's a lot of learning that takes place, but oftentimes there's a lot of unlearning too. And I think that is true for this.
Yeah. So I usually see people about every other week. And so often people come to me and they're like, okay, like I didn't do
I'm going to be honest with you.
Yes. And then I'm like, so you did what you wanted to do like 75+% of the time? Like, that's great. And they're like,
Wrap it.
yeah, but I had some chocolate at night and I didn't, whatever. I didn't also start working out. And that's where I'm like, these are other things that we didn't add to, what your goal was. You were successful in what we talked about. And so often I hear like, oh, thank you for like encouraging me and making me feel like, okay, I am actually making progress, even though like it almost doesn't feel like you're making progress because you didn't overhaul your life. Like it's so
Exactly.
easy to make these changes that it doesn't feel like it's moving the needle, but over time it will.
It is. There's a saying about like just trying to be 1% better every day, right?
Yes.
And I think I don't want to think people think that we're saying like, hey, just do the bare minimum, right? We still
Right.
want you to be making progress and everything. But I think there is an important line to recognize the difference between jumping in and setting yourself up for failure versus making these goals that you will be able to follow through with. And that's where you're going to build confidence. Not doing all the things at once, doing it in a way that you're able to continue to do it and prove yourself that it's possible to make these changes.
Yes. I've been talking about meal planning a lot recently, and people always feel like, okay, I'm like stuck in a rut with what I'm cooking, but it feels overwhelming to make new things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's totally this like, okay, if I keep making what I'm making now, then things are going to be boring. So I'm going to go out to eat. But if I want to cook new things, then I have to, like, all of my recipes have to be new. I can't cook any of the things that I'm cooking right now. And it's that same all or nothing thinking. And I always say, just pick one new thing each week.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can cook the same things that you've been cooking before. And on week one, it's going to feel like, man, I'm still eating a lot of the same things. I only have one new thing this week. But cooking one new thing, if you can plan it on a night when you don't have a ton of other things going on, that can feel manageable. And then after 5 weeks, all of a sudden you have 5 new things that you can make. And then in another 5 weeks, now you have 10 new things, and like it can totally build. And all of a sudden you have all of these new recipes and, other things that you can swap in and out for each week.
And that's a great example of how like the same thing goes for building healthy habits. Like even if you build, even if it's not one new thing a week, maybe every other week or maybe even once a month, like over the time and especially within the year, then things will change. So I think this might be another podcast for another day too, but just setting those realistic expectations when it comes to health goals as well, like weight loss timeline, changes in our hormones and everything. We could definitely talk about that because that ties in. So I want to kind of circle back to where we started with like the New Year's resolution. And if you are someone who maybe had this grand idea to have this amazing New Year's resolution and didn't go quite as planned for you last month, know that that's okay. And just think back what happened and get realistic with yourself. Hey, was this is a decent goal that I actually can follow through with, or need to reevaluate? And it's okay to start again in February and move forward like little chunks at a time.
Yeah. And even though like sometimes I feel like New Year's resolutions are just complete insanity, I totally get the like, it's a new year, it's a fresh start, like time to make changes. But you can also do that on a smaller level with each month. Um,
Even
to
each day or each meal.
yes, yes, absolutely. But just to give yourself a little bit of that like oomph to get going. It's okay to tap into a little bit of that. Just don't put all of the pressure on yourself of like, this has to be the perfect month or the perfect year or even the perfect day.
Exactly. And you and I talk about how you can just start whenever. It doesn't need to be a Monday or January 1st or anything like that. And that is absolutely true. But it's also okay to have like a starting point. And I've been seeing a coach that I follow talking about this a bit more. And it sounds like there's actually some decent research talking about how this can be helpful to have like that concrete time to start, just to wrap our head around it. So I think that's okay as well. So maybe you plan ahead, but maybe starting at the first of the month or whatever is really helpful for you. So we are all about taking action, obviously setting those goals you can follow through with. So we want to hear from all of you. What are some of your New Year's resolutions that maybe you followed through with in January and you're rocking it and you're moving forward? Maybe you're reevaluating things this month, but reach out to us on Instagram at Dietitian Haley and Dietitian Caitlin, and we'd love to talk you through some of those goals.